Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to unpack some really fundamental ideas, the kind that sort of underpin how we think about thinking.
Absolutely. And today, we're tackling a massive one.
Hmm.
A huge shift in philosophy concerning what we even mean by real or true.
Yeah, it's this journey from seeing truth as something solid, out there, objective, to seeing it as something built on, well, agreement, on convention.
It's a deep dive into the very foundations of ontology, the study of existence through the lens of language.
We're tracing this line, starting with Gottlob Frege's intense realism,
Then facing Ludwig Wittgenstein's pretty devastating critique.
and landing with Rudolf Carnap's idea that maybe it's all about the linguistic framework we choose.
Our mission really is to understand how existence itself seemed to become dependent on language, not just reflected by it.
It's that move from truth as correspondence does my statement match a fact, to truth as convention does my statement follow the agreed upon rules.
It's a seismic shift, and understanding it has huge consequences.
Okay, let's get into it. Starting point, Frege, and the absolute commitment to objective truth. So Frege, he's really the cornerstone here, isn't he? Trying to make language analysis as rigorous as mathematics.
Exactly. He wanted that same kind of certainty. His whole project was built on what we call semantic realism.
Which he basically took from how he thought about math.
Precisely. For Frege, a proposition in language, just like in math, had to be either true or false. No gray areas. Simple as that.
And crucially, the truth or falsehood wasn't about what we thought. It was independent of us.
That's the key. It depended entirely on correspondence with external facts. The truth value was primary.
So the ultimate meaning, the big tongue he called it, of a whole sentence like, the sky is blue.
It's simply its truth value. Either true or false. That's the reference.
But hold on, that feels a bit thin. You mentioned earlier his distinction between sense and reference, the sin and bedeutung. How does that fit? If morning star is Venus and evening star is Venus, both just mean true?
Ah, good point. That's where sin or sense comes in. The bedeutung reference is the object itself, Venus. Both phrases point to the same object,
Okay.
but they have different sin, different modes of presentation. One presents Venus as the star seen in the morning, the other is the star seen in the evening.
So the sin explains why learning they're the same thing as a discovery. It's not just words.
Exactly. It captures the cognitive significance. But for the logical structure, the objective bedeutung, the truth value, remained paramount for Frege.
And the crucial thing for our story is that Frege absolutely did not think he was just setting up some useful rules or conventions.
No, not at all. He believed he was uncovering the objective structure of reality, of thought itself. He was deeply afraid of what he called psychologism.
The idea that logic is just about how human minds happen to work.
Right. If 2 + 2 = 4 was only true because of human psychology, it wouldn't be universally objectively true. It would be contingent, relative. Frege saw that as collapsing logic into chaos.
So to avoid psychologism, and if it's not convention, where do these logical truths and linguistic structures live?
Well, this forces him towards a kind of Platonism. The entities his system needs, things like word, sentence, sense, meaning, truth, falsehood, they have to exist objectively.
Like numbers in Platonism, in some third realm.
Exactly. Independent of the physical world, independent of individual minds. They are objective, non-conventional, timelessly true or false. That's the only way, he thought, to ground logic with radical epistemological realism.
Wow. So the goal was set. Describe the world's structure using language, where language itself connects to this objective, almost Platonic reality.
That's the ambitious starting point. A total commitment to non-conventional, objective truth mirrored in language. The next generation would try to make this connection even more concrete.
Okay, so Frege lays down this incredibly ambitious realist goal. Then comes Bertrand Russell. He buys into the realism, right? But he finds Frege a bit too abstract.
Yeah, Russell was definitely in the same realist camp. Truth absolutely depends on correspondence with facts outside language. That part he kept. But he felt Frege's focus on just the truth value as the meaning meets the richness of the world, all the specific things and how they relate. Reducing the cat is on the mat just to shew true felt wrong. He wanted realism anchored more in actual experience.
And this connects to his big fight against certain kinds of metaphysics, particularly monism.
Absolutely. Russell really reacted against Hegelian monism, the idea that ultimately everything is just one big interconnected whole.
Because that view denies the reality of distinct things and the relationships between them.
Exactly. If everything is one, then relations like A is next to B aren't truly external relations between two separate things. They become just internal aspects of the single whole. Russell thought this denied the obvious complexity and diversity of the world.
So to fight that, he had to insist that relations are real things in themselves.
Yes, he championed the reality of external relations. The next two-ness is just as real, just as independent as A and B are. This was crucial for his view of the world as built up from distinct individual facts, an atomistic view.
And this atomistic view forced him to change one of Frege's key ideas, the context principle. Frege said words only get meaning within a sentence.
Russell couldn't have that. If the world is made of simple things and language needs to mirror that, then names must refer directly to those simple things, regardless of the sentence.
So he swaps context for atomicity.
Right. He introduces the principle of atomicity. The world is fundamentally composed of absolutely simple entities, simples, which have properties and stand in relations. These form atomic facts.
And these atomic facts are what atomic propositions in language are supposed to correspond to directly.
Precisely. That's the bedrock. He needed to find those ultimate, unanalyzable building blocks of reality to secure his realism.
Which leads to his very peculiar idea about what counts as a name. It's not everyday names like Caesar.
No, definitely not. For Russell, ordinary names like Caesar or Socrates are problematic. He called them disguised descriptions.
Meaning they actually stand for complex ideas, like Caesar means the Roman general who crossed the Rubicon.
Exactly. They can be broken down,
Right.
analyzed into further components. So they aren't truly simple, not atomic. They don't point directly to a simple thing.
So if Caesar isn't a real name, logically speaking, what is?
This is where it gets really restrictive. A true, logically proper name, for Russell, could only refer to something the speaker is directly acquainted with, something absolutely simple and unanalyzable.
Like what?
He basically concluded it could only be demonstrative pronouns like this or that, used ostensibly meaning, while pointing to refer to an immediate sense datum.
You mean like pointing at a color patch in my visual field and saying this?
Exactly. This is red, where
Yeah.
this refers only to the immediate sensation of redness, not to a physical object like a red book. Those were the only things simple enough to be named directly.
Wow, that narrows down language incredibly. The foundation rests on these fleeting sense data.
It does. But this extreme rigor served a very specific purpose. The dream of creating a logically perfect language.
Ah, the ultimate goal.
Russell envisioned a language that would be totally transparent, completely analytic. Each basic name would correspond one-to-one with a simple element of a fact. The structure of the sentence would perfectly mirror the structure of the reality it described.
So you could just look at the language and see the world's logical structure laid bare.
That was the hope, the ultimate expression of correspondence theory. Perfect mirroring. Objective truth secured through perfect linguistic representation.
So this whole project, Frege's realism, Russell's atomism, it's all about finding that solid, objective ground for truth in the relationship between simple facts and simple language.
Yes, that was the dominant quest in logic and philosophy at the time. Find the atoms, build the perfect language, secure knowledge.
Okay, so we have Frege and Russell building this intricate structure based on objective facts in a language that perfectly mirrors them. And then along comes Wittgenstein, who, ironically, was Russell's student.
Yes, the irony is thick. Wittgenstein initially worked right within that atomist picture, trying to perfect it in his Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus.
But he ended up dismantling the whole thing.
Fundamentally, his later work, especially in the philosophical investigations, delivered a devastating critique. He showed that the core assumption that we can find simple, objective facts whose structure dictates the meaning of our basic propositions just doesn't hold up.
The anchor they were looking for, it doesn't exist.
Pretty much. Wittgenstein argued that there are no propositions, not Russell's atomic ones, not the positivists' protocol sentences, that can unequivocally describe the external world independent of interpretation or convention.
Even the simplest possible case, like Russell's "this is black," pointing at a sense datum.
Even that. Wittgenstein showed that the meaning is inherently indeterminate without a rule.
How so if I'm pointing right at it?
Well, what does this refer to? The specific patch, the quality blackness, the shape, the surface. And what does black mean? Is it this exact shade? Any dark shade? Without a pre-agreed rule or practice for using these words, the connection between the word and the fact is ambiguous. The fact itself doesn't force one single interpretation.
Ah, so the meaning isn't just read off the world. It depends on how we've learned to use the words.
Exactly. Think of his famous example, pointing to a pencil and saying tove. What does tove mean?
Could mean pencil, wood, long, pointy.
Round, writing instrument. This particular object, the act of pointing. The bare act of pointing plus a sound doesn't fix the meaning. The meaning arises from the rule governing the use of the word within a language game, a practice.
So the structure isn't in the world waiting to be mirrored.
It's imposed by our linguistic practices, by the rules we follow. Wittgenstein's massive insight is this. What we call the structure of the world is always determined by a rule, not by a fact.
Wow.
And the implication is huge. If meaning depends on rules, and rules are conventional, then there can be no set of propositions outside a convention that describes the world objectively.
The whole Fregean Russellian dream of a language perfectly mirroring independent facts just evaporates.
It evaporates.
Yeah.
Because the mirroring idea relies on the facts having a determinate structure that language can copy. But Wittgenstein shows that structure is what the rules give it.
This sounds like it leads directly to ideas like Quine's ontological relativity.
It absolutely anticipates it. If there are no rock-bottom, non-conventional observation sentences, then the answer to what is there fundamentally depends on the theory or language you adopt.
So different languages could carve up the world differently, and you couldn't say one is objectively right.
Precisely. One framework might talk about rabbits, another about undetached rabbit parts, another about temporal stages of rabbithood. If they all account for the same observations, which one reflects true reality? Wittgenstein, and later Quine, suggest that's the wrong question. The choice is pragmatic, conventional.
So the search for the ultimate objective structure fails. We're left not with facts, but with conventions, with language games.
Yes. And this forces a complete reevaluation of what philosophy could even hope to achieve.
All right, so Wittgenstein pulls the rug out. No objective, non-conventional facts to anchor our language. That seems like it could lead to total relativism, right? Or just throwing up our hands.
It certainly created a crisis.
Yeah.
If the realist project is dead, what's left? This is where Rudolf Carnap steps in. He saw the force of Wittgenstein's critique and provided a way forward.
He was initially part of that realist camp too, wasn't he? Trying to reduce knowledge to basic sense data, protocol sentences.
Yes, he was a leading figure in logical positivism, very committed to that kind of reductionism. But being rigorous, he had to confront Wittgenstein's point. You can't actually formulate those protocol sentences in a way that's truly independent of a linguistic framework.
So he couldn't ignore the problem. What did he do?
He made a pivotal shift. He abandoned that strict reductive realism and embraced what's called linguistic relativism.
Meaning truth isn't about matching experience directly, but about fitting within a chosen language system.
Exactly. The truth of a statement depends on the linguistic framework you're operating within. Accepting a framework means accepting its rules.
Can you give an example, like the everyday world of objects?
Perfect example. Carnap would say that accepting the thing language, the framework where we talk about tables, chairs, trees, isn't about making some grand metaphysical claim that things really exist independently.
It's more practical.
It's about accepting the rules for forming statements about things. This chair is brown. And the rules for testing those statements, looking, touching. These rules are useful. They allow us to navigate the world, but they are ultimately conventional choices.
Okay, so we choose frameworks based on utility, but how does this prevent philosophical arguments from just going in circles?
This is Carnap's masterstroke. His distinction between internal and external questions. Methodological dualism, he called it.
Right, this sounds crucial. Let's break it down. Internal questions.
Internal questions are asked within an accepted framework. They're meaningful and often empirical or logical. So within the framework of arithmetic is 5 plus 7 equals 12 is a meaningful internal question with a definite answer according to the rules.
And within the thing language, are there any cups on the table? Is an internal question we can answer by looking.
Precisely. These are the questions science and mathematics deal with. They operate according to the rules of their respective frameworks.
Okay, so what are external questions?
External questions are questions about the framework itself, asked from a supposed standpoint outside all frameworks. Questions like, do numbers really exist, independent of our framework? Or does the physical world of things truly exist?
The big metaphysical question.
Exactly. And Carnap's radical conclusion was that these external questions are meaningless pseudo-questions.
Why meaningless?
Because there's no framework, no set of accepted rules by which you could even begin to answer them or verify an answer. They're asking for a justification that transcends any possible system of justification.
So you can ask if a framework is useful, practical, fruitful.
Yes, those are practical external considerations about whether to adopt a framework. But you can't meaningfully ask if the framework is true in some absolute framework-independent sense.
That's a powerful way to dissolve old philosophical disputes, like realism versus idealism about the external world.
It dissolves them by showing they were based on asking meaningless external questions. The meaningful questions are internal to the frameworks we choose to use.
Okay, now the really interesting part, applying this Carnapian framework, which was necessitated by Wittgenstein, back onto Frege's original project.
Yes, this retrospective view is key. Remember, Wittgenstein's critique was sort of internal to Russell, and the positivists, it showed they failed according to their own criteria of finding objective reference.
They couldn't deliver on their own promises.
Right. But Frege's system was equally non-conventionalist. He posited his entity sense, meaning truth as objective, existing in that Platonic third realm.
So Wittgenstein's argument that non-conventional reference is impossible, how does that hit Frege?
It hits Frege's system from the outside. It becomes an external critique relative to Frege's beliefs. Frege didn't claim to find his entities through simple reference. He posited them as necessary preconditions for logic.
And why does external versus internal matter so much here?
Because if the critique is external, it doesn't show Frege's system as internally incoherent. Instead, from the meta-ontological viewpoint provided by Carnap, it reveals Frege's foundational claims that these entities objectively exist as essentially arbitrary or speculative.
Arbitrary. How so?
Because Frege asserted their existence a priori without providing a way to verify it within an accepted framework, since he thought he was establishing the framework. From Carnap's perspective, asserting the objective reality of sense or truth is like asking an external question. It lacks justification within a rule-governed system.
So if we just left Frege's claims as he intended them as objective truths, Carnap's system would dismiss them as speculative metaphysics.
Exactly. Meaningless external claims. To save Frege's incredible logical contributions and integrate them into philosophy after Wittgenstein, we are forced to reinterpret his project.
We have to read him through a conventionalist lens, even if that wasn't his intent.
We basically have to. Carnap's framework, necessitated by Wittgenstein, compels us to treat Frege's foundational theses not as descriptions of reality, but as the sophisticated conventions that define his powerful logical framework.
So sense, meaning truth, falsehood, become defined entities within Frege's system, not things discovered outside it.
Yes. Their existence becomes framework-dependent. They exist because the rules of Frege's language game require them, not because they correspond to some independent Platonic fact. The whole ontological ground has shifted.
Okay, so wrapping our heads around this whole journey, it forces a really fundamental choice about how we view our basic concepts, doesn't it?
It really does. We've gone from this powerful desire, starting with Frege and Russell, to ground all knowledge on simple, undeniable, non-conventional facts.
That radical realism.
And we've seen how Wittgenstein's critique essentially blew that possibility apart, showing the inescapable role of rules and interpretation.
Which then leads, almost by necessity, to Carnap's conventionalist stance. Truth is relative to the linguistic framework we adopt.
That's the arc, from objective fact to indispensable convention.
So when we look back at Frege's original cast of characters, sense meaning truth, falsehood, we're left with basically two ways to think about them now.
That seems to be the core alternative, yes. Path one is the conventionalist reading.
The one retrospectively applied by Carnap, driven by Wittgenstein's insights.
Right. On this view, Frege's terms are treated as conventions. They are powerful, useful concepts that define the rules of a highly effective logical language game we've chosen to adopt, perhaps for its clarity or logical power.
They work, so we use them within that framework, but we don't need to believe they exist out there.
Exactly. Path two is trying to stick closer to Frege's original non-conventionalist intention.
Which means taking the Platonism seriously.
Yes. It means saying that sense, meaning, truth, and falsehood genuinely do exist independently, in that third realm, just like Frege thought numbers did.
What's the problem with that view now?
Well, while it respects Frege's intent and avoids psychologism, it becomes, from the post-Wittgenstein perspective, a rather obscure metaphysical claim. You're positing this vast abstract realm of linguistic entities without any clear way to verify their existence.
It sounds exactly like the kind of external question Carnap warned against.
It does. It requires a leap of faith into a specific kind of metaphysics that many philosophers, after Wittgenstein and Carnap, find problematic or unnecessary. Why posit this realm when the conventionalist reading explains the function of these concepts perfectly well within the framework?
So the fact that Wittgenstein's critique was external to Frege's specific beliefs is really significant. It didn't just refute him, it highlighted the speculative nature of his starting assumptions.
Precisely. It revealed the arbitrariness, from a meta-ontological perspective, of simply asserting the objective reality of these logical entities. It showed that realism itself needed justification, and the attempt to provide it via simple reference failed.
It mandated a response, and Carnap's framework provided that response by embracing conventionalism.
Yes. The failure to find that simple objective link between word and world made Carnap's distinction between internal framework-dependent questions and external meaningless ones seem necessary for philosophy to continue meaningfully.
It allows us to keep using powerful tools like logic and mathematics
without getting bogged down in unanswerable metaphysical debates about whether numbers or propositions really exist. We just accept the framework and work within it.
It's quite a shift. The moment you accept that even "this is white" needs a rule, a convention, to fix its meaning.
You've moved from thinking the world imposes its structure on our language to acknowledging that our language, our chosen framework, imposes structure on our experience of the world. #outro aware.
Wow. Okay, that was definitely a deep dive. We've journeyed from the high hopes of objective certainty in Frege and Russell
through the ground-shaking critique of Wittgenstein, showing the instability of reference,
to land on Carnap's framework-dependent conventionalism, where our understanding of what exists is tied to the linguistic rules we adopt.
It's a fundamental rethinking of the relationship between language, thought, and reality.
We've seen how the very structure of what we take to be real, true, or meaningful becomes dependent on the internal rules of these linguistic frameworks.
The quest for a truth independent of convention seems to have hit a logical wall.
And this whole discussion, this dramatic shift from realism to conventionalism, it leaves us with a really profound reflective question for you, the listener. If we accept this conclusion that the answers to what is there really do depend on the language or theory we choose to use.
And if maybe theories are, as Quine put it, just useful devices for working a manageable structure into the flux of experience.
Then the question becomes, is there any non-conventional truth left in the world? Is there anything out there that's true regardless of the framework we use?
And maybe even more pointedly, if there is such a truth, could we ever even talk about it or think about it without immediately capturing it within a new set of conventional rules, thereby making it framework dependent after all?
Something to ponder. It challenges our deepest assumptions about knowledge and reality.
It certainly does.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us